Okay, let's talk about gain staging. Why do we gain stage? There's a few different reasons. One of the main reasons is that mastering engineers like to be given a track with headroom so they can master the track and add onto it. They like generally between 4 and 6 dB. Some master engineers will say it doesn't matter as long as you're not clipping. But I always like to give between 4 and 6 dB. A little bit old school, but that's what most people do. The second reason why we gain stage is for something called the noise to sound ratio. In the old days, the originals of this item and this item used to produce a lot of white noise just from the electrics and the circuitry. And what would happen is if you recorded that gain in too low, if you turned that recording up in the mix, you'd turn the white noise up in the mix. And if you did that with everything, you just have loads of white noise, and it's not what anybody wanted. So if you record something low in volume, the white noise will be exactly the same volume as if you recorded that same thing at high volume. The difference is if you have to turn up the low recording, you're going to turn up the white noise. And that's why we recorded as loud as possible. Another reason why we gain stage is so that we have a bit more play in the faders. So if you look at the fader here, you can see that between 0 dB and 6 dB is this distance. Down here, the same distance is 12 dB. So if I've got my fader down here, it's really hard for me to make minor adjustments, whereas up here, it's a lot easier. Digital clipping. This is when your faders or your buses or your master go into the red and clip digitally in your DAW. It's not a nice sound. It's not anything that people want. There has been the odd exception, 1 in 1,000, where I've received a mix down to do and I've taken out the digital clipping and just couldn't get it to sound the same. That's very rare. We don't want it. It doesn't sound good. And it only ruins your gain staging. Now, people will say, well, with 32-bit, if your master's clipping, they can turn it down when it gets to mastering. Yeah, they can, but it's a bit amateur, isn't it? And we're not amateur. So just don't digitally clip. Analog emulations. This is one of the biggest reasons why I gain stage at the level that I do. And that's because analog emulations are designed to be fed a certain amount of gain. So for example, the UAD Ampex 102 is designed to be fed at minus 12 dB. The API 2500 on UAD is designed to be fed at minus 15. Some of the slates minus 16, and each manufacturer have their own level for optimum results. And they're generally right, but don't stick to these as gospel. Feed in a bit more if you want to and see how it sounds. It's how it sounds to you that's the most important. But what I do is this. I just start and I gain stage every single item to minus 12 dB. So how do I do that? Okay, so for example, I've got this kick here. When I get a kick, I find a kick that I like and I put it in. I've got the faders at 0 and I've got no plugins on. Let's have a listen to it. So I can see there that it's minus 4.56. So because this is an audio instrument or a sampler, I'm going to turn it down pre-fader to get it to minus 12. I generally like to go too far and then bring it up because I can see it changing. So minus 12.4, that's fine for me. Now, with a synth, or a sampler or a software instrument, you do it in that. But what about if you've got audio? Okay, so let's just say I've got this loop here. It's clipping in the red, it's plus 2.29. What I do then is I go into the clip and I turn it down pre-fade in the clip. I don't put a gain on the channel, I'll do it pre-fader. I'll turn that down 12 dB. Let's have a look at it. And then I get that to about minus 12, around abouts. And because the kick is generally the loudest thing in the track, all I'm ever doing is turning these down to work with the kick like this. And I do that on every single item that I put into the track. Get the fader to 0 with no plugins on, and I'll gain stage the level on the fader to minus 12. Some people do minus 14, some people do minus 16. It's totally up to you. If you choose to do something with no analog emulations, you might just do it to 0 and ensure it's not clipping in the red. That's what a lot of people do in dubstep, and people are trying to mix for loudness, but we're going to go into that in more depth later on. Okay, let's review why we use gain staging. So we've got more headroom for the mastering engineer. So we don't digitally clip. So we feed the analog emulations the right gain to get the optimum performance out of them. Fader accuracy. Remember, at the top of the fader, we can make finer amendments a lot easier, making it easy for us to get a better mix. And number 5, which most of us will never have to worry about, is noise to sound ratio. And that's when we're recording through and from old analog equipment with lots of noise. Now, there is another part to gain staging, and that's about mixing for loudness. And we're going to approach that in a separate part of this course. Remember, gain staging is just preparing the signal for the next stage in the mixing process. I basically just bring every item in, minus 12, pre-fader, no plugins. And then when I use analog emulations, I might boost it or take it down a little bit more to get the best effect out of it. And that's it.